At dinner, my parents called my 7-year-old daughter a mistake that shouldn't have been born. My sister laughed and agreed. My daughter burst into tears. I didn't shout. I did this. 3 days later, their lives started to unravel. Family dinners with my parents were always the same. The wine flowed, the remember when stories came out, and somehow every road led back to me being the joke. They didn't call it that, of course. They called it nostalgia. I called it free entertainment at my expense. That night was no different. The table was crowded. Mom, Dad, my older sister Erica, her husband Brian, their daughter Grace, and me. My daughter Izzy sat beside me, swinging her legs under the chair, trying to look grown up in the noise of adults. Derek, my husband, wasn't there. He'd chosen work over family dinner again. And I couldn't even blame him. If I could have faked an emergency at the office, I would have. We'd barely made it through the salad before the old stories began. Remember when Jenna came home crying because she thought she failed her math test? Mom chuckled. And it turned out she got a C! Everyone laughed. Erica leaned back smugly, sipping her wine. Dad grinned, tipping his glass in my direction. And Derek, he said, always working whenever family's around. Some things never change. More laughter. I forced a smile, stabbing at my food. It was routine. The warm-up act before the real gut punches. I could take it. I'd taken it my whole life. But then the conversation shifted. Erica's kids, her planned, perfect little angels, had just won some school award, and the table buzzed with pride. Grace was described as brilliant, her brother as a born leader. I let it wash over me. Good for them, truly. And then Dad smirked, swirling the wine in his glass. Not every child at this table was planned, he said. His voice was light, almost casual. Some were accidents. Mistakes. Mom laughed. Oh, yes. We certainly weren't planning on Jenna, were we? The heat crawled up my neck, familiar and bitter. I'd heard that story my whole life. But this time, Dad didn't stop there. Dad leaned in, almost conspiratorial, and said it. Izzy was never supposed to be here anyway. A mistake that shouldn't have been born. The air left the room. The laughter kept going, but for me, the sound was muffled, distant. I felt Izzy stiffen beside me. Her wide eyes filled with tears. For a moment she sat frozen, cheeks flushing red, lips trembling. Then she shoved back her chair, the scrape loud in the silence only I seemed to hear, and bolted from the room. Nobody else reacted. They just kept talking, lost in their own conversation, not even glancing at the empty chair. I stood up quietly and followed her down the hall. I found her in the bedroom, curled up on the bed, face buried in her arms, shoulders shaking. That image will never leave me. I sat beside her, stroking her hair, whispering nothing words. The kind you say when the real words would burn too hot. Back in the dining room, I could still hear them laughing. My family. My blood. They'd called my daughter a mistake, and never even noticed she left the table. I didn't shout. I didn't storm back into that room and demand apologies. What was the point? They wouldn't give one. They never had. But in that moment, something inside me shifted. I had lived my whole life carrying their cruelty. I'd let them call me an accident. I'd swallowed their digs, their jokes, their smug reminders that I was always less than Erica. But Izzy? No. They could aim at me all they wanted. I'd built calluses, but they had just aimed at her, and I wasn't about to let them scar her the way they scarred me. I kissed her damp hair and said nothing, because the words that mattered weren't for her. They were for me. In that moment, I made a decision. They thought it was another dinner, another night of casual cruelty. They didn't even notice the damage they'd done. But I did, and I decided it would be the last time they ever touched my daughter with their poison. 3 days later, their lives started to unravel. People always ask me, how could your parents say something like that to Izzy? How could they even think it? Here's the thing. It didn't come out of nowhere. That sentence at dinner, a mistake that shouldn't have been born, wasn't a lightning strike. It was the echo of a storm that had been brewing my entire life. Because according to my parents, I ruined their lives twice. The first time was the day I was born. I came 10 years after Erica. 10 golden, peaceful years where my parents thought their family was complete. Erica was the picture-perfect daughter. Smart, obedient, the kind of child they could parade around like a trophy. Then Mom found out she was pregnant with me. Too late to do anything about it, as she liked to remind me when she'd had a glass too many. "Oh, Jenna," she'd sigh, half laughing. "We weren't planning on you." We were done. If I'd known sooner, well, let's just say things would have been different. It was always told like a joke, a dark family anecdote. Everyone chuckled. I smiled politely, like the punchline was harmless. But let me tell you, when you grow up hearing you were only born because your mother's timing was off, it does something to you. So yes, mistake number 1, existing. The second time I ruined their lives, I was 16. His name was Derek, my first boyfriend. My only boyfriend, actually. We were kids, but we thought we were in love. We were careful. Protection, all of it. But accidents happen. And when they do, well, if you're my sister Erica, it's a romantic announcement in front of family with champagne glasses raised. If you're me, it's slammed doors, accusations of stupidity, and being called every name in the book short of slut. "Too young, too dumb," Dad hissed. "You've thrown your life away." "You've thrown our lives away," Mom added, hand pressed to her forehead like she was the tragic heroine in a soap opera. Erica, of course, was already married with a perfect house and her perfect children, Grace and Jack. Planned, polished, paraded around. My pregnancy wasn't just an accident, it was an embarrassment. So mistake number 2, getting pregnant. Izzy was born when I was 17. My parents were furious, humiliated. But they also swooped in to help. Help is a funny word, isn't it? Sometimes it means support, sometimes it means chains. They covered some expenses. They gave me a roof over my head, and for the rest of my life, they would hold it over me like an invoice I could never repay. "You owe us," they said. "We sacrificed everything for you." Did they? Not really. Because while they were scolding me for being irresponsible, Derek and I were the ones taking night shifts at dead-end jobs. We were the ones trading sleep for diapers and formula. We were the ones trying to build something. And Erica? Oh, she got plenty of help too. Mortgage deposit, childcare, vacations. But in her case, it was framed as generosity. With me, it was framed as debt. Funny how the same wallet can feel so different depending on who it's opened for. Here's what my parents never counted on. Derek and I didn't fall apart. We stuck it out. We worked. We clawed our way forward. At 19, we got married. Not because we had to. Because we wanted to. Because we loved each other. I started a small online business. Something I could do from home while raising Izzy. It was supposed to be side money, nothing more. But it took off. Orders came in, then repeat customers, then enough income that I didn't have to clock into anyone else's schedule. Before long, Derek joined me full-time. We built it together, and now we even have a couple of employees and a small office. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable. In fact, we were doing better than anyone expected. Better than most people with degrees. By 24, we were covering more than just our share of the bills. We were paying the bulk of the mortgage. We were covering utilities. Derek was repairing the roof, fixing leaks, mowing the lawn. I was cooking most nights, doing laundry, making sure the household ran. In truth, We weren't their dependents anymore. We were their providers. But if you asked my parents, they were still the heroes of the story. To them, I was still the accident they didn't want. The teen mom who embarrassed them. The girl they rescued. They'd sit at that table, glass in hand, and say things like, "Remember how we had to step in when Jenna ruined everything? Where would she be without us?" And I'd bite my tongue, because the truth, that they'd been living off us for years, wouldn't change their narrative. They were stuck in a past where I owed them, and no matter how much I gave, it was never enough. That's why what they said at dinner didn't shock me. It hurt. God, did it hurt, seeing Izzy's face crumple, hearing her chair scrape back, watching her bolt from the room. I'll carry that forever. But surprised? No, because they'd been calling me a mistake my whole life. The only difference this time was that my daughter heard it too. And that was the last time. I didn't know it yet, but the decision I made that night would snap every cord holding our family together. And when the dust settled, it wasn't Izzy or me left in ruins. It was them. Izzy ran to her room in tears, and I followed, pulling her into my arms. Her little body shook against me, hiccups breaking through her sobs. "You are wanted," I whispered into her hair. "More than anything. You are the best thing that ever happened to me." She clung to me like she was afraid I'd vanish too. That was the moment I knew. Enough was enough. I pulled out my phone and called Derek. He answered on the first ring. "We're moving out," I said. My voice didn't shake. He didn't hesitate. "I'll be right home." By the time he walked through the door, I had boxes pulled from the closet and bags half packed. He looked at me, at Izzy's red eyes peeking out from behind me, and nodded. "Let's do it." We didn't make speeches. We didn't give Mom and Dad the satisfaction of some dramatic scene. We just packed our bags. Izzy helped, solemn as a soldier, folding her stuffed animals into a box. She didn't ask why. She didn't need to. Kids know. By the next evening, the rooms we'd called ours were stripped bare. We loaded the car, drove to Derek's parents' place, and slept on an air mattress in their guest room. It wasn't glamorous, but it was safe. And for the first time in years, I woke up without the weight of my parents' voices pressing down before I'd even had coffee. That morning, Derek and I sat at his parents' kitchen table with our laptops. Between us lay a stack of bank statements and the kind of silence that comes when you know a storm is coming. "Ready?" Derek asked. I nodded and pulled up the banking app. One by one, I started shutting off the lifelines my parents had been leaning on. $1,200 a month toward their mortgage, $350 in utilities, $200 here, sometimes more, slipped into groceries and extras. Click, 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 click. Derek scrolled through his phone, crossing off a list of chores we'd carried without question. Patching the roof, mowing the lawn, unclogging the drains, cooking dinner 3 nights a week. "That's about, what, nearly $20,000 a year?" he muttered. "Closer to 25, I said, staring at the screen. My finger hovered over the last transfer, then hit cancel. It was done. I leaned back in my chair, heart steady. For the first time in my life, I wasn't their debtor. I was free. "They don't know it yet," I said, closing the laptop. "But the faucet just shut off. And the drought is coming." Derek reached across the table, squeezed my hand, and smiled grimly. "Let them find out the hard way." For a while, there was silence. Too much silence. I expected my phone to light up with fury the moment they noticed our empty rooms. It didn't. Hours turned into a day into 2. Nothing. I found myself checking my phone every time it buzzed, waiting for, "Where are you? What happened?" But no, nothing like that. It hit me slowly, like a bad joke. They hadn't even noticed we were gone. When the first call finally came, it wasn't what I expected. Not panic, not anger, just casual entitlement. "Jenna," Mom said breezily, "can you cook for us this weekend?" "Erica and the kids are coming." I almost laughed. "We don't live there anymore," I said. "We moved out." Silence. Then a sharp inhale. "What do you mean, moved out?" "You didn't even tell us." "I didn't think I had to," I said. "The empty rooms sort of say it all." She hung up. Later, through the grapevine, I heard their response. Not heartbreak, not even embarrassment. Smugness. "Finally," Dad told Erica. "She's standing on her own feet." "Took her long enough," Mom added. "At least now she's not a loser living under our roof." I laughed when I heard it. Dry. Bitter. Because if that wasn't the most perfect example of their delusion, I don't know what was. They actually thought they'd been carrying me, when in fact Derek and I had been carrying them. A few days later, the real calls started. "Where's the money for the utilities?" Dad demanded, his voice tight. "We don't live there anymore," I said. "We're not paying anymore." He barked a laugh. "Don't be ridiculous." "Of course you'll keep paying. You owe us." "No," I said. "We don't." The line went dead. The next call was worse. "You're abandoning us?" Mom snapped. "After everything we did for you?" "We carried you." "No," I said quietly. "We carried you." I hung up before she could answer. My hands didn't shake. Not this time. The calls kept coming. First Dad, then Mom, then Erica on their behalf. Over and over my phone lit up, and every time I let it buzz on the table until it went silent again. I wasn't playing their game anymore. It felt strange at first, ignoring them. For years I'd been conditioned to jump at every message, every sigh, every "we need you." But now I just watched the screen flash, then fade, like I was watching someone else's life, ghosting my parents. Who would have thought? Meanwhile, Derek and I signed the lease on our rental. Bright kitchen, 2 bedrooms, a little yard out back where Izzy could draw chalk rainbows on the pavement. It wasn't a palace, but it was ours. And unlike my parents' house, it didn't come with a bill disguised as family obligation. The approval was quick. Our income was solid. Our references clean. The landlord smiled when he handed over the keys. "You two seem steady." Steady. That was a first. I stood in the empty living room, the walls bare, the light streaming in, and I thought, this is what freedom looks like. Izzy ran circles on the hardwood floor, laughing, her voice echoing. And for once, the only thing pressing down on me was relief. Of course, my parents didn't know where we lived. Not yet. But they knew where we worked. It was a Tuesday when they showed up at the office, the small storefront Derek and I had turned into the heart of our online business. I saw them through the glass before they came in. 2 storm clouds marching across the parking lot. "Here we go," I muttered under my breath. The door slammed open. "Jenna!" Mom's voice cracked like a whip. "What do you think you're doing?" I didn't stand up. I just folded my arms across my desk and waited. Dad's face was red. "You abandoned us. After everything we gave you, after everything we did for you. And this is how you repay us?" I tilted my head. Calm. "Repay you?" "No, let's be clear. I carried you." For years, Mom gasped like I'd slapped her. "How dare you!" "We gave you a roof, food, help with that child." "That child," I cut in, voice sharp as glass, "is the reason we're having this conversation. Do you remember what you called her at dinner? Do you?" They exchanged a look, then shrugged, almost bored. "She wasn't wanted," Dad said flatly. "You weren't either." That's just how it was. It hit me like a cold wave, not because it was new, but because of how easily they said it, as if it was no more offensive than commenting on the weather. I stood then, slow, deliberate. I let you treat me that way. I let you laugh at me, diminish me, use me, but I will not let you do it to Izzy. This ends here. No contact, no money. Not ever again, Mom sputtered. You can't mean that. I do. The silence stretched. Finally, Dad sneered. You'll regret this. No, I said. You will. They left in a huff, slamming the glass door so hard the frame rattled. I sat back down, hands steady, heart pounding. Not with dread, but with power. That should have been the end. But people like my parents don't slink away quietly. They went to work. Within days, the smear campaign began. According to them, Derek and I had stolen from them when we left. We'd taken their money, drained their resources, and abandoned them in their old age. They painted themselves as saints, us as parasites. And Erica? Oh, she played her part too, nodding along, backing their story, feeding it to anyone who would listen. It didn't take long for the calls to start again. Not from my parents this time, but from relatives. How could you treat your parents this way? One cousin scolded. They gave you everything, and now you've just walked out. Walked out? I repeated, dry. Funny choice of words, because I didn't walk out. I paid out, and then I showed her. Receipts, bank transfers, $1,200 every month for the mortgage, $350 for utilities, hundreds more for groceries, repairs, extras, years of it. The silence on the other end was delicious. Oh, she said finally. Oh, I echoed. And I hung up. The receipts spread faster than the lies. I didn't even have to push them. Word of mouth did it for me. One relative showed another, who showed a neighbor, who told a friend at church. And just like that, the tide turned. The people who had wagged their fingers at me began shaking their heads at my parents instead. Liars. Manipulators. For the first time in my life, my parents' words didn't hold weight. My truth did. Meanwhile, back at their house, the unraveling had already begun. Without Derek, the leaks went unfixed. The lawn grew wild. The roof sagged under its own neglect. Without me, the kitchen was cold. They turned to takeout, the greasy kind that drains wallets and arteries at the same time. And without our money, the mortgage slipped. Bills stacked up. The utilities buzzed with warnings. Smugness turned to silence. Silence turned to panic. I didn't see it firsthand, but I didn't have to. The updates came through the same grapevine they'd used to smear me. Neighbors talked. Relatives whispered. They're struggling. They can't keep up. They don't know what to do without Jenna and Derek. I smiled when I heard it. Not out of joy, out of justice. For years they told me I ruined their lives. But the truth? I was the one holding their lives together. Fast forward a year. I never picked up another one of their calls. Eventually they stopped trying. Mom, Dad, Erica, they became strangers. And honestly, that was a blessing. Life without them was quiet, peaceful. Izzy flourished. The shadows under her eyes disappeared. She laughed more, slept better, and started running into school instead of clinging to me at the door. One evening, while she sprawled on the floor drawing with crayons, she looked up and said, "Mom, this house feels happy." It stopped me cold, because she was right. And it was the kind of thing a 7-year-old shouldn't even have to notice. Meanwhile, Derek and I grew our business, settled into our rental, and built a home that was ours. Nothing grand, but filled with the kind of love money can't buy. And my parents? Their downfall came the way most disasters do. Slow at first, then all at once. Derek had always been the one patching the roof, clearing gutters, making sure water didn't seep into the foundation. When we left, nobody did. The leaks spread, the mold crept in, and by the time they called an inspector, the damage was beyond repair. The estimate? Over $100,000. More than the house was worth. They couldn't fix it. They couldn't sell it. So they lost it. And here's the kicker. Losing the house didn't erase the debt. They still had the mortgage. Month after month, they were forced to make payments on something that no longer existed. To keep up, they drained what was left of their savings, even their retirement. By the time the bank was through with them, they had nothing left. No cushion, no safety net. Now they rent a cramped apartment across town, whispers trailing them everywhere they go. The same people they tried to poison against me shake their heads at them instead. Even Erica has pulled back, embarrassed to be seen standing too close. For years, they told me I ruined their lives. But the truth? I saved mine. And Izzy's. They lost everything. We gained everything that matters. So what do you think? Did I go too far or not far enough? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more.